The camera opens on an immense, sun-scorched landscape, where jagged mountains rise like ancient sentinels guarding the secrets of a forgotten world, and vast deserts stretch endlessly beneath a sky bleached by time itself. This is not merely a place on a map, this is a crossroads of civilizations, a land where caravans once carved lifelines through sand and stone, where wealth flowed as steadily as deceit, and where a people believed themselves untouchable by consequence. This is Madian, the nation of Prophet Shuaib, whose story is preserved not in ruins alone, but in the eternal words of the Quran, as a warning that echoes across centuries and civilizations. Madian was strategically positioned along the great trade routes that linked southern Arabia with the Levant, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. Caravans laden with spices, textiles, metals, and precious goods passed through its markets, transforming the region into a hub of commerce and influence. By every material measure, Madian was prosperous. Its people mastered trade, negotiation, and measurement. Scales and weights were the instruments of their wealth, and markets were the beating heart of their society. But beneath this outward success lay a moral rot, subtle at first, normalized over generations, and eventually embraced as a way of life. The Quran introduces Madian not merely as a place, but as a moral condition, a society whose corruption was woven into daily transactions. They cheated in weights and measures, shortchanged the weak, exploited travelers, and manipulated the vulnerable under the guise of legitimate trade. What appeared to be small deceptions, fractions shaved from scales, measures subtly reduced, accumulated into a systemic injustice that poisoned the social fabric. Wealth concentrated in the hands of the powerful, while trust collapsed among the people. Commerce, once a means of cooperation, became a weapon of oppression. Into this world was sent Shuaib, a man from among them, known for eloquence, wisdom, and moral clarity. The Quran presents him not as a distant outsider, but as a familiar voice rising from within the society itself. He understood their language, their customs, their justifications. And it was precisely this intimacy that made his message unbearable to them. Shuaib called them to Tawhid, the worship of one God alone, but his call did not stop at theology. It struck directly at their economic practices, their social ethics, and their abuse of power. "O my people," he declared, as recorded in Surah Al-Araf and Surah Hud, "worship Allah, you have no deity other than Him. Give full measure and weight, and do not deprive people of their due. Do not spread corruption on the earth after it has been set in order." These words were revolutionary. Shuaib was not merely asking for ritual devotion, he was demanding a complete restructuring of their moral economy. To obey him would mean surrendering dishonest profits, dismantling exploitative systems, and accepting accountability beyond human law. The response was swift and hostile. The elites of Madian, those who controlled the markets and benefited most from corruption, recognized the danger immediately. Shuaib's message threatened their wealth, their authority, and their carefully constructed illusions of legitimacy. They mocked him, questioned his sanity, and accused him of trying to dominate them through moral superiority. "Does your prayer command you," they sneered, "that we abandon what our forefathers worshipped, or that we stop doing as we please with our wealth?" Their words reveal a civilization that equated freedom with greed and tradition with truth. As Shuaib persisted, the opposition escalated. What began as ridicule turned into intimidation. The Quran records their threats with chilling clarity. They warned Shu'aib and his followers of expulsion, of exile from their own homeland, unless they returned to the corrupt ways of the majority. This was not merely a rejection of a prophet, it was the enforcement of moral conformity through fear. In Madian, righteousness became a crime, and honesty a rebellion. Yet Shu'aib stood firm. He reminded them that true strength lay not in wealth or numbers, but in justice and obedience to God. He warned them repeatedly of the fate of earlier nations of Ad, Thamud, and the people of Lut, civilizations that had once seemed invincible, only to be erased by their own arrogance. These were not myths to Shu'aib's audience, they were historical memories embedded in regional consciousness. Still, the people of Madian dismissed the warnings, convinced that trade routes and prosperity made them immune to divine judgment. As days turned into years, the divide deepened. A small group believed and followed Shu'aib, choosing integrity over profit, faith over comfort. The majority, however, doubled down on corruption. Cheating became more aggressive, injustice more blatant, and moral restraint virtually non-existent. The Quran describes this phase not as sudden rebellion, but as persistent defiance, a society knowingly crossing ethical boundaries while fully aware of the consequences they had been warned about. Then, the tone of the narrative shifts. The warnings cease. The calls soften into silence. In the Quranic pattern, this silence is never a sign of abandonment, it is the final pause before judgment. The people of Madian continue their markets, their deals, their laughter, unaware that the very ground beneath their feet has been marked for reckoning. Nature, which they believed to be stable and predictable, is about to become the instrument of divine justice. The Quran tells us that the punishment did not come as fire from the sky or flood from the sea, but as something far more terrifying, a violent earthquake and a deafening cry, a sound so overwhelming that it shattered hearts before it shattered walls. In Surah Al-Araf, it is described as a rajfa, a seismic convulsion that struck suddenly, leaving them lifeless in their homes. In Surah Hud, it is called as Sayha, the mighty scream, an event so intense that it annihilated an entire civilization in a moment. But this destruction was not random. It was precise, decisive, and morally charged. Those who had cheated by fractions were destroyed in totality. Those who destabilized society through injustice were themselves uprooted from existence. And Shu'aib, along with the believers, was saved, standing as a living testament that morality, though often outnumbered, is never abandoned by divine justice. As the dust settles over the ruins of Madian, the camera pulls back, revealing not just a destroyed city, but a universal lesson etched into history itself. The story of Shu'aib's people is not confined to antiquity, it transcends time, geography, and culture. It speaks to every society that builds wealth without ethics, every economy that sacrifices justice for profit, and every civilization that mocks moral accountability while trusting in material security. The camera returns to the ruins of Madian, but now the imagery shifts not to what was destroyed, but to what once thrived. The markets re-emerge in dramatic reconstruction, narrow streets alive with movement, the clash of bargaining voices, the rhythmic clink of metal weights striking wooden scales. Trade is not merely an occupation here, it is identity, power, and pride. In Madian, commerce defines status, and control over measurement defines authority. The Quran exposes this reality with chilling precision, revealing how economic corruption, once tolerated, evolves into a collective moral blindness that no longer recognizes injustice. The screen fades in from black, and the silence left behind by Madian's destruction becomes its own form of narration. Where once there was commerce, there is emptiness. Where voices once argued over profit and price, there is only the whisper of wind across shattered stone. In the Quranic worldview, this silence is not accidental, it is testimony. The earth itself has spoken, and its verdict is final. The story of the people of Shu'aib reaches its climax not in chaos alone, but in meaning, as divine judgment unfolds through forces that transcend human control. The Quran's use of the earthquake Rajfa and the overwhelming cry Sayha is deliberate and layered with symbolism. These are not random natural disasters, they are instruments of moral reckoning. The people of Madian had built their power on control of markets, control of measurements, control of the vulnerable. Their crime was rooted in manipulation, subtle, calculated, and systematic. In response, the punishment came from that which no human system can manipulate, the earth beneath their feet and the unseen command that shatters existence in an instant. The earthquake represents the collapse of false stability. Madian's wealth gave them the illusion that their foundations were secure. Their cities were built of stone, their trade networks extended across regions, and their influence appeared immovable. Yet the Quran reminds us that no structure, economic, political, or physical, stands without moral integrity. When justice is removed, stability becomes an illusion, and when accountability is denied, collapse becomes inevitable. The Earth's convulsion is thus not merely destruction, it is exposure. It reveals that the society was hollow long before the ground began to shake. The cry, described as Sayha, adds a dimension of terror that goes beyond physical ruin. Classical scholars have described it as a sound so intense that it overwhelmed the heart, extinguishing life before escape was possible. In Quranic language, sound is often associated with command, creation, and annihilation. Just as existence began with divine command, it can end with it. The cry that destroyed Madian serves as a reminder that human defiance, no matter how organized, remains powerless before a single decree from the Creator. What is striking in the Quranic narrative is the precision of the punishment. The destruction is total, yet targeted. The believers are spared. Shu'aib is saved. There is no collateral confusion, no randomness. This reinforces a central Quranic principle: divine justice is never blind. It distinguishes between corruption and resistance, between those who perpetuate injustice and those who endure it without surrendering their integrity. In this distinction lies one of the most profound reassurances offered by the Quran, that moral clarity, even in minority, is never forgotten. As the camera lingers over the ruins, the narration shifts from destruction to reflection. The people of Madian are described as though they had never lived there at all. Their disappearance is complete, their legacy erased, their names remembered only as a warning. This erasure is itself a form of judgment. Civilizations often seek immortality through monuments, wealth, and influence. Madian sought permanence through trade and power. Instead, they achieved the opposite: obliteration. Their absence becomes their lesson. Shuaib's final address to his people stands as one of the most emotionally charged moments in the Quranic account. He does not celebrate their downfall. He does not claim victory. Instead, he expresses sorrow, declaring that he delivered the message sincerely and that their destruction grieves him. This moment reframes the entire narrative. Prophetic success is not measured by how many are destroyed, but by whether the truth was conveyed without compromise. Shuaib's grief confirms that divine punishment is not born of anger alone, but of justice delayed until all excuses are exhausted. The documentary now widens its lens, connecting the fate of Madian to the broader Quranic pattern of destroyed civilizations. Ad, Thamud, the people of Lut, Pharaoh's Egypt all shared a common trait: arrogance fortified by power. Each believed their strength made them immune. Each dismissed warning as superstition or weakness. And each was undone not by external enemies, but by internal corruption that invited divine intervention. Madian's crime was unique in form but identical in essence: economic injustice elevated into a societal norm. This pattern reveals a fundamental Quranic principle: civilizations do not collapse merely because of disbelief, but because disbelief manifests as injustice. Faith, in the Quranic sense, is inseparable from ethics. When belief is severed from responsibility, it becomes meaningless. Madian believed in God, but they rejected his authority over their dealings. They prayed, but they cheated. They claimed tradition, but they practiced oppression. This contradiction sealed their fate. The narration now shifts from ancient ruins to the present world. Modern skylines replace desert landscapes. Stock exchanges replace ancient markets. Digital scales replace wooden ones. Yet the moral question remains unchanged: are transactions just, or merely profitable? The story of Madian is not a relic, it is a diagnostic tool, a lens through which every economy can be examined. Wherever profit overrides fairness, wherever systems reward deception, the seeds of collapse are already planted. The Quran does not demand the abandonment of trade or wealth. On the contrary, it affirms commerce as a means of sustenance and cooperation. What it condemns is exploitation disguised as success. Madian's destruction was not due to economic activity, but to economic corruption. This distinction is crucial. Wealth built on justice strengthens societies. Wealth built on deceit hollows them from within. Madian chose the latter, and the earth itself rejected them. As the episode draws toward its conclusion, the camera returns one final time to the ruins. Time has erased the footprints of merchants, the echoes of bargaining, the weight of arrogance. Only the lesson remains. The Quran preserves this story not to entertain, but to warn. It is a reminder that history is not linear, it is moral. Patterns repeat. Consequences return. And civilizations that ignore ethical foundations, no matter how advanced, walk the same path as those reduced to dust before them. The story of Shuaib and Madian does not end in destruction, it ends in instruction. It asks every generation the same question: when profit and principle collide, which will you choose? The documentary's final act opens not with ruins, but with continuity. The camera moves slowly across landscapes shaped by time, ancient caravan paths fading into modern highways, stone markets dissolving into towering financial districts, the clatter of bronze weights replaced by the silent calculations of digital systems. Civilizations change their appearance, but their moral challenges remain hauntingly familiar. The story of the people of Shuaib does not conclude in the dust of Madian, it extends forward, echoing into every age where power, profit, and principle collide. In Islamic tradition, Prophet Shuaib occupies a unique and profound position. He is remembered not only as a messenger of faith, but as the prophet of economic justice, a voice that confronted corruption at its most normalized level: daily transactions. While other prophets challenged kings, idols, or empires, Shuaib challenged the marketplace itself. His mission struck at the quiet spaces where morality is most easily compromised, where wrongdoing hides behind routine and legality. In this sense, his message was among the most disruptive, because it demanded honesty not only in belief, but in behavior. The Quran preserves Shuaib's words as a blueprint for societal balance. He did not call for the destruction of trade, nor did he reject prosperity. Instead, he demanded equilibrium, fair measure, truthful dealings, and restraint in the pursuit of wealth. This balance reflects a deeper Quranic principle, that civilization thrives not through unchecked growth, but through justice. When wealth circulates fairly, trust flourishes. When trust flourishes, societies endure. When trust is broken, collapse becomes only a matter of time. The destruction of Madian thus becomes more than a historical event, it becomes a moral law written into the fabric of history. The Quran does not present divine punishment as arbitrary wrath, but as consequence. Corruption invites instability. Exploitation breeds resentment. Deception erodes cohesion. Madian's end was not sudden, it was accumulated. Each dishonest transaction, each ignored warning, each act of mockery added weight to a scale already tipping toward destruction. When the final moment arrived, the balance could no longer be restored. Shuaib's legacy also reshapes how success is measured. In worldly terms, he appeared defeated, outnumbered, rejected, expelled by his own people. Yet in Quranic terms, he achieved complete victory. He delivered the message without compromise, maintained integrity under pressure, and remained patient without surrendering truth. His success was not in changing the outcome, but in fulfilling responsibility. This redefinition of victory challenges modern assumptions that equate success with dominance, profit, or popularity. As the documentary broadens its scope, the narration draws deliberate parallels to the modern world. Today's economies are more complex, more interconnected, and more powerful than anything Madian could have imagined. Yet the core temptation remains unchanged: to gain advantage by reducing fairness, to maximize profit by minimizing accountability, to justify injustice through complexity. The tools have evolved, but the moral equation has not. Wherever systems reward deception, they replicate the conditions that doomed Madian. The Quranic narrative forces an uncomfortable question upon every generation: can a society endure if its economic foundations are unjust? History offers a consistent answer. Civilizations may survive corruption for decades, even centuries, but the internal damage accumulates silently. Inequality widens. Trust collapses. Institutions hollow out. Eventually, the same systems that produced prosperity produce instability. The fall may come through crisis, collapse, or conflict, but it always comes. The final imagery returns once more to the land of Madian. The wind moves across empty ground where markets once thrived. No monuments remain to boast of former greatness. No inscriptions celebrate wealth or power. Only absence speaks. This absence is intentional. The Quran does not glorify fallen civilizations, it erases them. Their memory survives not through architecture, but through warning. Their story is preserved not in stone, but in scripture. In its closing moments, the documentary reframes the destruction of Madian not as an ending, but as a choice presented to every society. The choice between short-term gain and long-term justice. Between moral restraint and unchecked greed. Between listening to warning and silencing conscience. The people of Shuaib made their choice, and history recorded the result with irreversible clarity. The narrator's voice slows, deepens, and delivers the final reflection. The Quran recounts this story not to terrify, but to awaken. Not to condemn the past, but to protect the future. Madian was not destroyed because it traded but because it betrayed trust. It was not erased because it prospered but because it corrupted prosperity. And it was not forgotten by accident but by design, so that others might remember. As the screen fades to black, the final words linger like an echo across time. When the scales of justice are tampered with, the earth itself will one day correct them.